I still remember that morning as if it was carved into my bones. The day that was supposed to be the happiest of my life. The day I thought I would walk into a new chapter with love, laughter, and family. Instead, it became the day my heart was broken in front of every pair of eyes that mattered. I was 26, standing in the back room of a little church dressed in white lace. My hair was pinned high, my lips trembling as I tried to smile at my reflection. All around me, women from my family fussed over the veil, the flowers, the little details. Everyone whispered, "She's glowing," and I forced myself to believe them. My fiancé, Daniel, was waiting at the altar, or so I thought. We had known each other since college, and for years I believed he was steady, reliable, my safe harbor. I trusted him more than anyone. I thought the vows we were about to speak would seal our promises forever. When the music started, I walked down the aisle, every step echoing with excitement and nerves. The pews were full, neighbors, friends, relatives, all smiling, watching. My mother wiped a tear. My father tried to look strong, but his chin trembled with pride. But the one person who was supposed to be there, Daniel, wasn't. At first, I thought it was a delay. Maybe he had stepped outside for air. Maybe he was fixing his tie. But as I reached the altar and saw only the priest and his empty place, the whispers started. "Where is he?" Someone asked from the back. "Did something happen?" Another murmured. The silence grew heavy. My heart pounded so loudly, I could barely hear the organ stop playing. The priest shifted uncomfortably, his eyes darting toward the door as though Daniel might walk in any second. But he didn't. Minutes stretched into a lifetime. Then Daniel's best man shuffled forward with a pale face. He leaned close to me, his words quiet but sharp enough to cut through me. "He's gone. He left." I blinked, not sure if I'd heard right. Gone? Left? What did that even mean? But the truth hit fast, sharper than any blade. He had walked away. He wasn't sick. He wasn't delayed. He had chosen not to marry me. The crowd gasped. I felt the heat of 100 eyes burning into my skin. Some faces were full of pity, others of shock, some with cruel satisfaction. My world, which I thought was solid, collapsed right there on the steps of the altar. My father rushed forward, putting his arm around me, but it only made the humiliation worse. I wanted the earth to open and swallow me whole. I wanted to disappear before anyone saw another tear fall. But I stood frozen, my veil trembling as I breathed hard, my chest tight. Inside I was screaming, "Why? Why would you do this to me here, like this?" The whispers turned into open voices. She must have done something wrong. Maybe he found someone else. What a shame. Such a pretty girl. Each word was like a dagger. Not only had Daniel abandoned me, but he had left me to be judged, gossiped about, dissected like some scandal in a small-town newspaper. I managed to step away from the altar, my legs barely moving. My father guided me down the aisle, past the stairs and the murmurs. My dress felt heavier with each step, like it carried all the shame in the room. Outside the church, the cold November air struck my face. It felt harsh, but it was better than the suffocating eyes inside. I ripped off the veil, clutching it in my hand as if I could tear away the humiliation with it. Daniel was nowhere to be seen. His car was gone. He had vanished without even looking me in the eye, without giving me a reason. Back at home, the relatives tried to console me. They said, "You're strong, you'll move on," but I couldn't hear them. All I heard was silence where Daniel's voice should have been. All I saw was his empty space at the altar. That night, lying in bed with my makeup smeared, I thought about every little sign I had ignored. The way he avoided talking about the future sometimes. The strange phone calls he would cut short. The excuses when he was late. I had pushed it all aside because I loved him, because I believed love made everything right. But love doesn't excuse betrayal. Love doesn't heal humiliation. What I felt most wasn't just heartbreak, it was rage. Rage at him for being a coward. Rage at myself for trusting too blindly. Rage at the world for letting me stand there in front of everyone, only to be abandoned. That night, something changed inside me. I whispered to myself, "This is not the end of me. I will not be remembered as the girl left at the altar. I will rise from this and one day, He will see me again. Not broken, not begging, but stronger than he could ever imagine. The humiliation had burned deep, but in the ashes, a new fire was born. A fire that would carry me through the years ahead. A fire that would turn pain into purpose, heartbreak into fuel. And though I didn't know it then, that fire would one day bring him back into my world. Only this time, I would be the one holding the power. When the church doors closed behind me that day, I thought the worst was over. I thought that once I left the eyes of the crowd, once I tore the veil from my head, I could breathe again. But I was wrong. The hardest part wasn't walking out of the church. It was walking back into my own life. The whispers didn't stay inside those walls. They followed me home, down the street, into the grocery store, the post office, everywhere. In a town like ours, nothing stayed private. By the next morning, everyone knew. My neighbors looked at me with that mix of pity and curiosity, as if they were staring at a broken ornament in a shop window. They didn't even bother hiding it. Some would say, "Oh, sweetheart, you're so brave," in voices dripping with false sympathy. Others would whisper when they thought I couldn't hear, "She must have done something. No man just leaves like that." Every word bruised me. Every look reminded me of the empty altar. I stopped going out as much. I pulled the curtains closed, shut the world out. My once bright apartment became a dark cave where I cried into pillows until my body had no more tears left to give. But the worst wound wasn't from strangers. It was from my own family. My mother, though she loved me, couldn't help but sigh and say, "Men don't just run without a reason, darling. Maybe you pushed too hard. Maybe you scared him." Each word felt like salt rubbed into an open wound. My father stayed mostly silent, but his silence cut deeper than words. He looked at me with sadness, disappointment even, as if I had somehow failed the family by being left behind. I wanted to scream. I didn't choose this. I didn't walk away, he did, but screaming wouldn't change their eyes. Days turned into weeks. The wedding flowers died. The dress went back into its box, but the shame clung to me like smoke on fabric. I felt small, invisible, useless. I could have stayed there forever, buried under the weight of heartbreak and humiliation. And for a while I almost did. But one night, something shifted. It was 2 months after the wedding that never happened. I sat alone in my apartment, staring at my reflection in the dark window. My face looked hollow, drained of color. My hair was messy, my eyes swollen. I didn't recognize the woman looking back at me. And then a thought hit me so hard it made me sit up straight. Is this what Daniel left me with? This empty shell of myself? Is this how he wins? By breaking me so badly that I forget who I am? That thought lit a spark. I remembered who I had been before him. A young woman with ambition, with dreams bigger than this small town. I had studied hard in college. I had wanted to be someone, to make a difference. But somewhere between falling in love and planning weddings, I had lost myself in him. And that night, I swore I would never let anyone erase me again. I stood up, walked to the mirror, and said out loud, "This is not where my story ends. This is where it begins." The next morning, I made a choice. A simple one but powerful. I would rebuild myself, piece by piece, step by step. Not for Daniel. Not to prove anything to the town. For me, I started small. I cleaned the apartment, opened the curtains, let the sunlight in. I threw away the wilted flowers, the leftover decorations, everything that smelled of that day. It hurt, but it was necessary. Like tearing off a bandage to let fresh air heal the wound. Then I looked for work again. At first, I took small jobs. Secretarial work, filing paperwork, answering phones. Nothing glamorous. But every paycheck, every new skill, felt like a brick laid in the foundation of a new life. At night, I studied. Law books, online courses, anything I could get my hands on. It was exhausting, but the exhaustion was different from heartbreak. It was purposeful. It was growth. I had once dreamed of becoming a lawyer, and now I was determined to make it real. The whispers didn't stop. The town still talked, but their voices began to matter less. Because while they were stuck gossiping, I was moving forward. I learned to carry myself differently. I walked taller. I spoke firmer. The same people who once whispered now looked at me with surprise, maybe even respect. One evening, as I left the courthouse after finishing some internship hours, I caught a glimpse of myself in the glass doors. I wasn't the broken bride anymore. I wasn't the girl abandoned at the altar. I was someone stronger, sharper, unstoppable. And in that moment, I realized something powerful. Daniel had given me the greatest gift without meaning to. By breaking me, he had forced me to rebuild myself stronger than ever before. I whispered quietly, "Thank you for leaving. You'll regret it one day." It wasn't about revenge then. It wasn't about making him pay. It was about proving, to myself, that I could rise from the ashes. That no man, no betrayal, no humiliation could keep me down forever. That vow carried me through the years that followed, through the endless nights of studying, through the bar exams, through the first cases where I stood in court with trembling hands but a steady voice. The pain became fuel. The shame became armor, and with every victory, big or small, I told myself, this is who I was meant to be. Not a bride abandoned, but a woman who rose again. I didn't know when or how, but I knew deep down that someday Daniel would see me again. And when that day came, he would not see the broken girl he left behind. He would see the woman he could never have again. When I look back at those years after my vow to rise again, I see them as the hardest, but also the most important years of my life. They were not pretty. They were not easy. They were not the kind of years people write about in fairy tales. But they were the years that built me. I had no shortcuts. No magic doors opening for me. I worked for every inch of progress. At first, I was juggling small jobs and night studies. I would work as a receptionist during the day, smiling at strangers, answering phones, filing endless papers, and then go home, make a quick dinner of noodles or eggs, and bury myself in law books until midnight. It was exhausting. My eyes would blur over the pages. My hands would shake from too much coffee and not enough sleep. But every late night felt like another brick in the wall I was building around myself, a wall that would make me unbreakable. I remember one winter night, sitting by the small heater in my apartment, wrapped in a blanket, with piles of books around me. My friends were out celebrating the holidays. Families were posting pictures of togetherness, laughter, feasts, and there I was, alone, memorizing case laws. For a moment, loneliness washed over me. That voice inside me whispered, "Why are you doing this? No one will care. No one will see." But then I thought of Daniel's face. I thought of the way he left me standing in front of everyone, humiliated. I thought of the pitying eyes of the town. And I answered that voice, "I care, I see. And one day, the world will see too." That became my fuel. Step by step, I pushed through. I applied for internships at law firms. At first, I was given the smallest tasks: photocopying, making coffee, sorting files. Some lawyers didn't even know my name, but I kept my head down and worked. I watched, listened, and learned. I studied the way lawyers spoke in court, their tone, their confidence, their strategies. I scribbled notes in my journal like a student watching masters at work, and slowly I started finding my own voice. When I finally got the chance to stand in court for the first time, my knees shook. My hands trembled so badly I thought the papers would slip from my grip. The judge looked at me with impatience. The opposing lawyer smirked as if I were a child pretending to play dress-up, but then I opened my mouth and spoke. My voice cracked at first, but as the words poured out, I felt something rise inside me: strength, conviction, fire. By the end of my argument, the smirk had vanished. The judge gave a small nod. I had been heard. It wasn't a big case. It wasn't life-changing. But for me, it was everything. Because in that moment, I knew I belonged there. From then on, the climb became a little less steep. I worked on more cases, each one harder than the last. Some nights I went home defeated, certain I had chosen the wrong path. But other nights, I felt victorious, alive, unstoppable. And then came the day I passed the bar exam. I remember standing outside the examination hall with my results in hand. My heart pounded as I read the word, pass. I cried right there on the sidewalk, tears streaming down my face, strangers staring at me like I'd lost my mind. But I didn't care. Those tears weren't of sadness, they were of triumph. Every sleepless night, every whispered insult, every scar of humiliation had led me to this moment. I wasn't just the abandoned bride anymore. I was a lawyer. The town began to look at me differently. The same people who once whispered about my shame now spoke my name with respect. "She's tough," they said. "She's smart. She doesn't back down." But here's the truth. Inside, I still carried the pain. I still remembered that church, that empty altar. And while I no longer cried over it, it never left me. Instead, I wore it like armor. I promised myself one thing. I would use my power not just for me, but for others. I knew what it felt like to be powerless, to have your dignity stripped away. So I fought cases for people like me, for the humiliated, the overlooked, the broken. Every win for them felt like a win for the woman I once was. There was one case I'll never forget. A young single mother, accused unfairly of negligence, stood trembling in court. She had no money, no resources, no one to fight for her. I took her case. I stood beside her, argued with every ounce of strength I had, and when the judge ruled in her favor, the woman collapsed into my arms, crying. In that moment, I realized my purpose was bigger than revenge, bigger than proving people wrong. My purpose was justice. Still, in the quiet of the night, I often thought of Daniel. Where was he now? Did he know what I had become? Did he ever regret it? Part of me hoped he did. Part of me wanted him to see the woman he had underestimated. I didn't know then that fate was already preparing that moment. That one day, he would walk back into my life, not as my groom, not as my equal, but as a desperate man in need of my help. But before that twist came, I had to keep climbing. Case by case, win by win, I became not just a lawyer, but a force. I was no longer the girl who stood waiting at the altar. I was the woman who stood tall in court, who spoke for those who couldn't, who carried herself with unshakable pride. I had rebuilt myself. And deep down, I knew the story was only just beginning. Life has a strange way of circling back. You think you've left some chapters behind, buried them so deep they'll never resurface. But one day, without warning, the past stands right in front of you, breathing, asking for a seat at your table. That's exactly what happened to me. It was an ordinary morning at my office. My desk was stacked with files, my phone kept buzzing with calls, and my assistant was rattling off appointments for the day. I was tired but focused. I had learned to thrive in the chaos. And then my assistant knocked lightly on the door and said, "There's a man here to see you. Says it's urgent. No appointment. Normally I didn't entertain walk-ins, but something in her tone made me pause. "What's his name?" I asked. She checked her notes. "Daniel." The pen slipped from my hand. For a moment I thought I had misheard. The name echoed in my ears like a ghost whispering from another lifetime. Daniel. The man who had left me at the altar. The man who had crushed me into dust. I straightened my shoulders. "Send him in," I said, my voice steady, though inside my chest my heart pounded like a drum. And then he walked in. Time had not been kind to him. He looked older, worn, the charm he once wore like a crown now dulled by lines of worry and failure. His confident stride was replaced with hesitant steps. He didn't look like the man who had once humiliated me in front of an entire town. He looked like a man who had been beaten down by life. "Clara," he said softly, almost a whisper. "It's been a long time." I leaned back in my chair, folded my hands, and gave him the smallest smile. "Yes, Daniel, it has." There was silence between us, heavy and charged. I could see in his eyes that he expected me to ask how he was, what brought him here. But I didn't. I let him stew in the silence. I had waited years for this moment, and I wanted to see how he would handle it. Finally, he cleared his throat. I need your help. I wouldn't be here if I had any other choice." The irony almost made me laugh. Once upon a time, he had all the choices. He had the power to decide my fate with one cruel action. And now, here he was, with no choices left, standing in my office, asking me for help. "What kind of help?" I asked, my tone polite but cool. It's legal trouble," he admitted, lowering his head. "Business partners. They cheated me, lied to me. I lost everything. They're dragging me to court. And his voice broke slightly. "I don't know who else to turn to." I let his words sink in. The man who once left me abandoned, humiliated, now abandoned himself, betrayed by the people he trusted, broken by the same cruelty he once dealt to me. For a fleeting moment, I felt a pang of something unexpected. Pity. Not for the man he was, but for the shadow he had become. But the feeling passed quickly. I leaned forward, my eyes locking onto his. "Do you remember the last time you stood in front of me, Daniel? The last time I looked into your eyes?" He swallowed hard. "Yes. You left me standing there, humiliated, broken, while the whole town watched. You made me feel worthless." My voice was steady, but inside I could feel the heat of old wounds resurfacing. "And now, years later, you come to me because you're the one who's broken. Do you see the irony?" He couldn't meet my gaze. His shoulders slumped. "I know I don't deserve your help. I know I hurt you. But please, please, Clara, I'm desperate." For a moment, I let silence hang in the air. Then I stood and walked to the window, looking out at the city skyline. This city had seen me rise from ashes. It had seen me transform from the abandoned bride into the lawyer who now stood unshaken. I turned back to him. "You're right, Daniel. You don't deserve my help, but you'll get it. Not because of who you are, but because of who I am." His eyes widened, confusion flickering in them. "I am a lawyer," I continued. "I fight for justice, even for those who once wronged me. But make no mistake, Daniel, you'll never again hold power over me. If I take your case, it will be on my terms." He nodded quickly, relief washing over his face. "Thank you. You don't know what this means to me." Oh, but I did. I knew exactly what it meant. Because in that moment, the balance shifted. Years ago, he had left me powerless. Today, he stood powerless before me. I sat back down, picked up my pen, and looked at him with calm authority. "Let's begin then. Tell me everything." And as he spoke, pouring out his troubles, I listened, not as the abandoned bride he once crushed, but as the woman who had risen stronger, sharper, and unshakable. The reunion I had once dreaded was no longer a wound. It was a victory. When Daniel returned to my life, I thought it would be nothing more than an awkward conversation, a brief meeting, and then silence again. But I was wrong. His visit was only the beginning. After our first meeting, he kept coming back. At first, I thought it was only about his case, the legal trouble he had mentioned. But slowly I realized it was something more. Daniel wasn't just asking me for legal help. He was asking me for something deeper. One evening, after a long day in court, I found him waiting outside my office. He looked tired, almost fragile, like someone who had been fighting battles he was doomed to lose. "Clara," he said softly, "can we talk?" "Not about the case. About us." I froze. "About us." The words tasted bitter on my tongue. There hadn't been an us for years, not since the day he left me at the altar. I gave him a hard look. "There is no us, Daniel. That ended the day you humiliated me in front of the world." He nodded, accepting the blow like a man who knew he deserved it. But then he looked at me with those tired eyes and whispered, "I regret it every single day." For a moment, I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to scream at him, to tell him that his regret meant nothing, that it didn't erase the pain he had caused me. But another part of me, the part that had grown stronger, wiser, stayed calm. "You regret it now because you lost everything," I said coldly. "Back then, you didn't even flinch when you destroyed me." "I was a fool," he admitted, blinded by pride. I thought I could do better. I thought walking away would give me freedom. But I was wrong. I've been paying for that mistake ever since. His words were heavy, filled with sorrow. But I had to remind myself, sorrow doesn't heal scars. You think saying sorry can fix the years I spent picking myself up from the ashes? I asked sharply. "No," he said quietly. "I don't expect forgiveness. I only came to tell you the truth, that you were the best thing that ever happened to me, and I threw it away. And now here I am, broken, while you've built an empire. You won." That last sentence caught me off guard. You won. He wasn't wrong. Years ago he left me powerless, abandoned, mocked. But now, he was the one at my mercy, pleading, broken, while I sat in strength and authority. For the first time, I saw the full picture. Life had flipped the script. He looked at me, almost begging. "Clara, please. I know I don't deserve anything from you, but I need your help, not just with the case, but with forgiveness. I don't want to carry this weight anymore. Forgiveness." The word hung in the air like smoke. Did he deserve it? No. Could I give it? Maybe, but not for him. For me. I leaned forward, resting my hands on the desk. My voice was calm, sharp, and steady. "Daniel, you're asking me for something bigger than forgiveness. You want me to erase the past, but I can't. The past made me who I am today. Every wound, every tear, every humiliation, it all forged me into this woman sitting before you now, stronger, smarter, unbreakable." He swallowed, his face pale. "So you'll never forgive me?" I thought about it for a long moment. Then I said, "I may forgive you someday, but not because you deserve it. If I forgive you, it will be because I refuse to let your betrayal define my heart any longer." He lowered his head. His hands trembled. I could see the weight of his guilt crushing him. And for once, I didn't feel like the victim. I felt like the victor. This was my power. Not the power to destroy him, but the power to rise above him. I stood up, walked around the desk, and faced him. "Daniel, I'll help you with your case, but after that we go our separate ways. You don't get to walk back into my life as if nothing happened. You lost that right years ago." His eyes glistened with unshed tears. I understand. And in that moment, I knew he did. He finally understood the pain he had caused, the cost of his betrayal, the strength it took for me to rebuild. As he left my office that night, I felt something shift inside me. Not pity, not anger, not even love. Something stronger. Freedom. His plea had not broken me. It had freed me, because I realized I no longer needed his apology, his regret, or his love. I had everything I needed within myself. The next morning, when I looked in the mirror, I saw a woman who had survived the worst and come out shining. And I smiled because I knew one truth: the real power was never his to take. It was always mine to reclaim. The morning of the trial, I woke up before dawn. The city was still quiet, the streets dark, and the air heavy with the cold. But inside me there was no silence. My thoughts were loud, rushing like waves. This was not just another case for me. It wasn't only about the law or winning inside the courtroom. It was about power, justice, and something far more personal. Because sitting across from me in court would be Daniel, the man who once left me broken at the altar, now relying on me to save him. I dressed carefully that morning, choosing a dark suit that spoke of authority and confidence. As I stood in front of the mirror, I didn't just see a lawyer preparing for battle. I saw a woman who had been to hell and back, a woman who had carried scars and turned them into strength. Walking into the courthouse, I felt every pair of eyes on me. Some recognized me, others only saw the determined lawyer walking with her head high. But inside, I carried both the weight of my past and the strength of my present. Daniel was already there, sitting at the defense table. He looked nervous, his hands tapping the wood. His face carried lines of regret and fear. For a second, our eyes met. His gaze was full of hope, but mine was steady, unreadable. I wasn't here for him. I was here for the truth. The judge entered, and the trial began. The case itself was about betrayal. Daniel's business partner had turned against him, accusing him of fraud, theft, and dishonesty. Ironically, the man who once betrayed me was now a victim of betrayal himself. Life had a way of balancing the scales. The opposing lawyer wasted no time painting Daniel as a liar, a cheat, and a man without honor. I listened, arms crossed, my face calm. Inside, I thought, once upon a time, I would have agreed with every word. But this was my role now. My job was to defend him, not because he deserved my loyalty, but because I had chosen to. Because I wanted to show him, and everyone watching, what real strength looked like. When it was my turn, I stood. My voice was steady, sharp, cutting through the courtroom like a blade. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," I began, "you've heard many things about my client today. Words like liar, cheat, and thief. But I ask you, are those words truth, or are they weapons used by someone desperate to hide their own betrayal?" I saw the jurors shift, some leaning forward. Good. I had their attention. I laid out the evidence carefully. Documents, records, witnesses, all showing that Daniel had not committed fraud. His partner had orchestrated everything to make Daniel look guilty while stealing money for himself. Piece by piece, I built the story of betrayal, showing how trust had been broken, how lies had been spun. As I spoke, I caught Daniel watching me. There was something almost painful in his eyes. Maybe it was admiration, maybe regret, maybe both. But I didn't let it distract me. I was here for justice. The trial stretched on for days. Each morning, I walked into that courtroom with the same calm fire. Each evening, I walked out knowing I had done my best. There were moments when the opposing side tried to shake me, to twist my words, to corner me. But I had been cornered before, left alone on a wedding day, mocked by whispers, forced to rebuild my life from ruins. If I had survived that, no lawyer, no argument, no trick could bring me down. The more I fought, the more the truth became clear. The jury could see it, the judge could sense it. Even Daniel began to realize how much I was doing for him. One night, after a long day in court, he approached me outside the courthouse. His voice was soft, almost broken. "Clara," he said, "I don't deserve this. I don't deserve you fighting for me." I looked him straight in the eye. "You're right. You don't. But this isn't about what you deserve. It's about what's right. And what's right is justice." He nodded, tears shining in his eyes, and walked away. For the first time, I felt no anger toward him, just clarity. The trial entered its final stage, the closing arguments. The opposing lawyer spoke first, trying one last time to convince the jury that Daniel was guilty. His words were sharp, his voice loud, but I could see doubt in the jurors' eyes. Then it was my turn. I stood slowly, walked to the center of the courtroom, and let the silence settle before I spoke. "Betrayal," I said, letting the word linger. "It is the sharpest knife a person can feel. It comes from those closest to us, those we trust, and that is exactly what happened here. My client trusted his partner. He believed in him, built with him, and shared everything with him. And what did he receive in return? Lies, deception, theft." I paused, letting the weight of my words sink in. This case is not about my client's mistakes. It's about his partner's betrayal. And if we allow betrayal to win, then justice loses. I looked at each juror, one by one, steady and strong. You have the power to right a wrong today. The power to protect the truth. The power to say betrayal will not win. When I returned to my seat, the courtroom was silent. I had said enough. The jury left to deliberate. Hours felt like days. And then, finally, they returned. The foreman stood and read the verdict. Not guilty. A wave of relief rushed through the room. Daniel closed his eyes, his shoulders trembling. I sat calmly, my hands folded, my face composed. Inside, I felt something shift again. Not triumph for him, but peace for me. Because I had done what I came to do. I had fought, I had won, and I had proven not just to the world but to myself that I was no longer the broken bride who once stood humiliated. I was Clara, the lawyer, the fighter, the survivor. And as I left the courtroom that day, I realized something important. The trial had never been about Daniel. It had been about me, about proving to myself that betrayal had not destroyed me, that I could stand in the very place where justice was decided, hold the truth in my hands, and win. And I did. After the trial ended, the courtroom slowly emptied. Lawyers packed up their files, the judge left, and jurors whispered to one another as they filed out. I gathered my things with calm hands, though inside me there was still a storm of emotions. I had won, yes, but victory didn't feel like it used to. It wasn't about the glory or the applause. It was about the quiet strength I carried in my chest. Daniel sat at the defense table, his head lowered, shoulders slumped. For a moment, he didn't look like the man who once stood proud, who had once thought he was above everyone else, including me. He looked small, defeated. And in that moment, I realized he wasn't just relieved by the verdict. He was clinging to me as his only lifeline. As I walked past him, he stood up quickly. "Clara," he said, his voice shaking, "please." "Wait." I paused but didn't turn immediately. Part of me didn't want to face him. Not here, not now. But another part, the lawyer in me, the woman who had faced worse, remained still, waiting. He came closer, his words spilling out in desperation. I don't know how to thank you. I don't even know why you did it. After everything I put you through, after the way I left you, you still stood by me in that courtroom. I turned and looked at him, my face calm but firm. I didn't do it for you, Daniel. Don't mistake this for forgiveness. I did it because it was right, because the truth mattered, because justice had to win. He swallowed hard, his eyes glistening. But still, you saved me. I shook my head. No, Daniel, I saved myself. He looked at me like he didn't understand, but I didn't explain further. Some truths didn't need to be spelled out. In the days that followed, Daniel tried again and again to reach me. He called my office, left messages, even waited outside once. He wanted to talk, to apologize, to explain. But what explanation could heal the wound he had caused? What words could erase the memory of standing alone at an altar while whispers of pity and mockery filled the room? One evening, I finally agreed to meet him. Not because I wanted to hear him, but because I wanted to close the chapter properly. We met at a quiet cafe, the same kind of place where once, years ago, we had shared laughter and promises of forever. The difference was, back then, I believed him. Now I only believed in myself. He arrived looking worn, his expensive suit wrinkled, his face pale. He sat down across from me, nervous, like a man facing judgment once more. Clara, he began, I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't deserve that. But I need you to know I was a fool. I thought I was chasing something better. I thought leaving you was freedom, but it wasn't. It was the biggest mistake of my life. I listened quietly, sipping my coffee. My face gave nothing away. He searched my eyes for some sign of softness, but I had none to give. I see you now, he continued, his voice breaking. I see the woman you've become. Strong, fearless, respected. And I can't stop thinking, that could have been our life together. You could have been my wife. You could have been the mother of my children. Instead, I threw it all away. His words hung in the air. Once they might have broken me. Once I might have begged him to stay. But now, they sounded like echoes from a past that no longer belonged to me. I leaned forward, my voice steady. You're right about one thing, Daniel. It was the biggest mistake of your life. But don't confuse your regret with my loss. I didn't lose anything that day. I gained freedom. I gained strength. And I built a life far better than the one you ever offered me. He stared at me, his mouth slightly open, unable to respond. I stood, leaving money on the table for my coffee. You wanted me to hear your apology. Now I have, but this is where it ends. You had your chance years ago, and you threw it away. Don't come looking for me again. As I walked out of the cafe, I felt no anger, no bitterness, no longing, only peace. Daniel was no longer my story. He was just a chapter, long closed. In the weeks that followed, I focused on my work, on the people who truly mattered, on the life I had built brick by brick. Daniel tried a few more times to reach me, but I didn't answer. I didn't need to. He had already taken enough from me. He wouldn't take my time, my energy, or my future. And in the silence that followed, I realized the truth. The greatest revenge wasn't the courtroom victory, or watching him squirm in regret. The greatest revenge was living well, standing tall in a life he could never touch, a life he would forever envy but never share. That was my justice.